Let's get ready to mortgage. He is the prince of programs, guru of guidelines, master of matrices. He puts the fun in funding. Please welcome Mark, Mr. Mortgage-eitel.
All right. My name is Mark-eitel, and this is the Mr. Mortgage Show. And friends, you are in the right place if you want the data. Not the crazy headlines, not the scary news reports, but the data, the tips, the tricks, the strategies, and all the info that you need so you can go out and make better real estate and mortgage decisions for you and your family. And wow, guys, what another crazy week of headlines. Often the headlines contradict the data that is featured in the article or the report or the data set. And it always blows my mind. But interesting week, no surprise, mortgage applications are down week over week, another 2%. So 2% less this week than last, even though rates have pulled back a little bit. We're back under 7, and we are 27% down year over year. And a lot of people think, okay, here we go. We're slowing down the demand side. Prices have to follow, right? Well, guys, there's still just not enough supply in the market to outpace the demand. There's still more demand, especially in that first home buyer price point, in that mid price point. Man, there's a lot of absorption in that category of home values. We're seeing it reported from multiple regions that people are experiencing robust offers and, lots of attendees around open houses. Now, I know it's all unique to each individual market, but just as national numbers go, it's still prices are holding and sellers are still selling their properties at a rather fast clip if they're priced right. So fascinating time that we're in. We haven't seen a real estate market like this ever in the history of the real estate market, and certainly not since I've been in real estate since 1999. We've experienced such a rapid appreciation cycle that a lot of people are anticipating this bubble bursting, but we're just not seeing the fundamentals line up for that. I want to share something interesting with you. I saw a news report on CNBC featuring Meredith Whitney, and some people may remember that name. Meredith was or credited at least, as being one of the first analysts to predict the market troubles of the early 2000s, right? She was on the front end of saying, we got a crash coming. So when she speaks, people have a tendency to pay close attention. And she's been out of the limelight for a while, and now she's back in because, real estate's the hot topic once again. Well, here's what she reported, which I find fascinating. She predicts a downturn in prices over the next 2 to 5 years. And that everybody's ears perked right up when that information was released. When she spoke those words, if you will, ears perked up all across the real estate market. But then she went on to say that decline is projected to be somewhere between 2 and 3% over 2 to 5 years. Not 2 to 3% a year, 2 to 3% total decline somewhere in the next 2 to 5 years. So guys, wow, that's actually really, really good news. And what I mean by that is, on the surface, it sounds like home prices are declining. It's better to wait, right? But is it really better to wait for a 3% savings? And if you were to buy today and home prices go down 3% in 5 years, did you really lose money? And here's what I mean by that. Let's play this out in today's market. If you were to buy a $400,000 house today and put 10% down, you'd have a mortgage of $360,000, or roughly $40,000 in equity, right? 400 minus 360. Now, I know there are other costs that go into a transaction, other numbers that are involved, but just for this illustration, let's stay top line, high level, round numbers. So in 5 years, if that property declined the full 3% that she predicts, and it could be more, it could be less, but I'm using her numbers, that property would be worth $388,000. Oh my God, I lost 12 grand, right? Well, let's play it all the way out. If you took a 30-year fixed rate at 6.75%, which is about the rate of the day as we're doing the show with you today, after 60 payments, right, after a full 5 years, that loan balance would be $337,500 roughly. There's some change in there too. But here's my point. 388 minus 337,500 leaves you $50,500 in equity. So you lost 12, right, on paper, but you've absorbed it. You started with 40,000 in equity and you now have 50,000 in equity. And I get it, right? $12,000 less valuable is the asset that you financed. But if you were to rent for those very same 5 years and spend, I don't know, $3,000 a month, that's what? $30,000, $36,000 a year times 5 years, well over $150,000, right? $180,000 in 5 years, waiting to offset that $12,000 that you'd lose if you jumped in right now, which really isn't a loss because you'd have $10,000 more in equity by owning and buying today and suffering a 3% loss. And that's making a ton of assumptions, assuming interest rates don't go back down, assuming you don't refinance. This is all just high level. But my point is that article is really, really good news, because if property values only suffer a 3% pullback in 5 years after the crazy, crazy appreciation run that we've been on, wow, the market is pretty darn healthy. And she went on to say that the average loan to value of properties in this country, and I haven't researched this data, but it was in her analyst report, 30%. Now, I'm sure that's taking into all the people who own their properties for cash. But the point of her sharing that is there's so much equity in the market to absorb a downturn, right? If consumers get in trouble, here's the typical consumer pattern, right? You buy a house, you build equity, the economy sours, you find yourself in debt, you do a cash out refinance, you bail yourself out, and then maybe a second one, and then you might have to sell the property to get yourself out of trouble. That's usually the cycle. Well, we're seeing more and more people do the debt consolidation refi, but not at the numbers that are getting any attention by any of the analysts or any of the data hounds out there. So my point in that is we are still early in that cycle. The consumer is still spending at a healthy clip, and there is so much equity in the market to absorb any downturn. Heck, a lot of people could sell their property for 20% under value and still make money, not to mention that cash out refinance strategy. And I'm going to share a really, really cool story with you sometime during today's show where a gentleman pulled cash out of his property, paid off debt, his mortgage payment went up, his interest rate went up, his monthly bills went down, and he took some of that equity and used the landlord loan that we talk so much about, bought an investment property, and that investment property positive cash, each month he's going to throw that against principal only on his property. So yes, his interest rate went up. Yes, his payment went up, but he's going to pay it off faster. He's saving money each month and building equity in 2 properties. If that kind of stuff interests you, hang in there. We're going to get to it. But you hear the music, you know what that means. That's my cue. We'll be back in a few. Sit tight after this very, very short break. We'll be back with more of the Mr. Mortgage Show. Hey, it's Mark Eitel, host of the Mr. Mortgage Show. You hear me all the time talking about the need to have the very best team representing you in a real estate transaction. And that starts with a really great agent. If you've got a great agent, that's awesome. But if you don't, check out www.reallyGreatAgents.com. There you'll find the best of the best, regardless of the city they work in or the brokerage they work for. www.reallyGreatAgents.com. www.reallyGreatAgents.com.
Welcome back to the Mr. Mortgage Show. Call us now at 855-462-7292.
All right, we are back. My name is Mark Eitel, and you are tuned into the Mr. Mortgage Show. And friends, if you have questions, if you have comments along the way, you can call or text the Anytime hotline, 855-462-7292. That's 855 888-462-7292. That is the Anytime Hotline. Jen, my producer, is standing by, womanning the hotline, and she'll get your questions on the air. One more time, that's 855-462-7292. Hey, if you prefer to shoot us over an email, you can do that by visiting mrmortgageradio.com, mrmortgageradio.com. Scroll all the way to the bottom of the page. Click that email icon and you can type your question in there. Jen will read it on the air for you. mrmortgageradio.com or the Anytime Hotline, guys. We always enjoy your questions and comments. But hey, I was telling a story about a gentleman who truly was thinking outside the box. And we get so wrapped around the axle with the headlines, right? People talk about the median home price is slipping. Well, what does that really mean, right? So if you don't understand the confusing definition of median and how that applies to housing, it can be truly misleading. We produced a 1-minute video explaining median, showing the entry-level homes, the mid-level, and the high-level in a neighborhood, in an area, because that's the thing with all this data. It doesn't separate out the $2 million, mountain-facing beautiful homes or the ski resort home or the waterfront home in Florida. It lumps all the data together with the 3-bedroom, 1-bath starter home. So median means the one right in the middle of the data set. So if a lot of activity is happening on the lower price point end of the market, right, the entry-level consumer, the entry-level home buyer, the move-up buyer, and that high-level price point is slowing a bit, fewer multi-million-dollar properties going on the market, those numbers get skewed downward. So just know what median means, because oftentimes it's contradictory to the data in your neighborhood, right? Because it doesn't take a 3-bedroom, 2-bath home in XYZ zip code and compare it only to other 3-bedroom, 2-bath homes in XYZ zip code. That's where a really great agent can help. And hey guys, I talk about it from time to time, but we are happy to introduce you to a really great agent if you'd like. Just go to mrmortgageradio.com and click on that really great agent icon. But I digress. So this gentleman looked past the headlines, looked past the data, saw that he was running up his credit cards, did a cash out refinance debt consolidation combo loan, right? The all-in-one. Actually, it's not called an all-in-one. That's a whole nother show for what an all-in-one mortgage actually is. But anyway, he paid off his car payments and his credit cards and had enough cash left over to put down a down payment on an income-producing home, a single-family home that's being rented out. And he used the landlord loan to buy that house. And my point in sharing that story was his mortgage payment went up, his mortgage interest rate went up, but his total monthly outflow, because he's not paying those credit cards, he's not paying those car payments, went down. And then he took the cash and instead of buying a jet ski or a boat, put a down payment down on an income producing property that's producing about $800 a month in positive cash flow. And that $800 he's applying to the principal of his property, still making his mortgage payment, saving a ton each month, and throwing an extra $800 a month at principal, roughly. These are all round numbers. But I share that because he looks like, the Pied Piper. He's out in front of the pack doing things that people think are impossible because rates are up and prices are up. But he found a way, and it makes sense for him financially. So oftentimes people could benefit from making a move and capitalizing on some equity, but they're mentally married to this 3% interest rate. And because of that, they think it makes no sense. But he found a way, regardless of rate, to use that equity that was captured in his home to pay off and really what started it for him were the car payments. He got a great rate on the car loans. He just wildly overpaid for the cars because it was in the height of the pandemic. And there was an interesting data set released this week that used car prices are sliding again. And that is putting a lot of people in an upside down position, and they can't sell or refinance their cars because they owe more than they're worth. So that's what started the conversation with this particular gentleman. And it parlayed itself into a strategy that he's buying some investment property. But anyway, guys, I know some questions just popped in. I'm going to throw it over to Jen for the first question of the day.
Sharon sent us this one. I just want to say thanks. We called last week about our insurance policy getting canceled. Anyway, we did a new policy through your guys. We even saved some money. Thank you for all your help.
Hey, Sharon, thank you for that. It's awesome that you felt the need to reach back out. I really, really appreciate that. We'd love to hear that it worked out for you. And if I remember correctly, Sharon, you were either canceled or rate increase. No, you were canceled, right? And you had just a couple months to get a new policy. So super excited that you were able to benefit from that. And guys, that's at mrmortgageradio.com as well, that HOI policy review. We'll get you in touch with an agent in your area, an insurance agent that may be able to help, because my God, homeowners insurance rates are out of control across the board, especially in Hurricane Alley, if you will. I'm talking to people regularly who are getting their policy premium letters with a doubling policy in a lot of cases in the Florida market. So just wild, but glad it worked out for you. Hey, Jen, do you have a question?
Kristen sent us an email. If we do a rec refi, are we limited to what debts we can pay off? I guess I'm asking if the debts have to be on my credit report.
Hey, that's a great question. No, you can use it to pay off. There's no regulation within the rec structure of the loan. Reduce, eliminate, consolidate is the rec refi. As long as your debt to income ratio works. Sometimes where you're required to pay off certain debt is when we're trying to lower your debt to income ratio to get you to qualify for the loan program. And in doing that, sometimes it's required to pay a certain credit card or a certain car payment off because we're lowering your monthly payments. But assuming that you sorry for that term, but assuming that your debt to income qualifies for the program, you can use any additional cash to pay off any debts that you want. So brilliant question, though. I appreciate that one. Hey, guys, you hear the music? You know what that means? That's my cue. We'll be back in a few. Sit tight on the other side of this very short break. We'll be back with more of the Mr. Mortgage Show. Hey, it's Mark Eitel, host of the Mr. Mortgage Show. You hear me all the time talking about the need to have the very best team representing you in a real estate transaction. And that starts with a really great agent. If you've got a great agent, that's awesome. But if you don't, check out www.reallyGreatAgents.com. There you'll find the best of the best, regardless of the city they work in or the brokerage they work for. www.reallyGreatAgents.com. www.reallyGreatAgents.com.
Welcome back to the Mr. Mortgage Show. Call us now at 855-462-7292.
All right, we are back. My name is Mark Eitel, and you are tuned into the Mr. Mortgage Show. Friends, thank you so much for spending a little bit of your day with us. We do this each week right here, same bat time, same bat station, and always enjoy and encourage your participation. Hey, if you've got questions or comments, just call or text 855-462-7292. That's 855-462-7292. That is the Anytime Hotline. And Jen is womanning the hotline, and she'll happily get your questions on the air. And if you prefer to shoot those over via email, just head on over to mrmortgageradio.com. That's mrmortgageradio.com. Scroll to the bottom of the page, click that email icon, and she will read them on the air for you. Let me throw it over to Jen for another question.
This one is from Ari. If we take out a reverse mortgage and later need to move, can we keep and rent the house?
That is a great question with a very easy answer. No. No, you can't. So a reverse mortgage can only be on your primary residence. So that would preclude that scenario because as soon as you move out, it's no longer your primary. But here's something that's super, super cool about reverse mortgages that few people realize, because that's a brilliant strategy, right? You no longer have a mortgage payment and you're renting the property out to generate additional cash flow. So I love where your head is, and I love what you're thinking. Now, you can rent a room out in your home to generate cash flow should you need to. But here's where it gets pretty cool. you can use a reverse mortgage to purchase a property. And we can talk about that if you need more information about that. And this is interesting to you, reach anybody, guys, anybody, Ari, but anybody else. I'd love to talk to you about this strategy because very few people know it even exists. But you can buy a home with a reverse mortgage and go into it never having to make a monthly mortgage payment. But you can buy a duplex, a triplex, or a 4-unit property, move into one of the units, use a reverse mortgage to buy the property, and benefit from the cash flow and not have to make a monthly mortgage payment. Now, you do have to pay your taxes, you do have to pay your insurance, you do have to maintain the property, and there are, caveats around all of this. You have to qualify. But my point is, you can use a reverse mortgage to buy an income producing property if that property is going to be your primary residence. And it sounds like you may be trying to consider a strategy that uses the reverse so you don't have a mortgage payment, but then provides positive cash each month. So just a thought, it's an awesome, awesome tool. And I am happy to discuss it with anybody who has questions, because never before have people had this much equity, and the reverse mortgage is getting you access to a lot of that equity. Now, the downside is interest rates are higher than they were 2 years ago. So the rates are less attractive than they were 2 years ago, but people have a ton more equity, so it's kind of a balancing act. But brilliant question. Hey, Jen, do you have another?
Chuck sent an email. I caught the end of you talking about increasing your interest rate and mortgage payment, but saving money each month. I think I missed something. Can you explain that again? Thank you.
Hey, Chuck, that's a great question, my man. And I talked about it in length, but let me give you a real quick summary. So this particular client did a cash out refinance and a debt consolidation combo, right? So he pulled enough cash out to use it to go buy an investment property. But to answer your question, in this instance, he increased his interest rate and his loan balance, therefore increasing his mortgage payment. But his total monthly expenses, what actually leaves his checking account each month, went down because he paid off the car payments and all the credit cards. So what I was sharing with that is, this is a guy who didn't get wrapped around the axle with the scary news of the day and feel like he was locked into a situation. He has a ton of newfound equity, the house's money, if you will, right? Because properties have appreciated so quickly. And he wanted to get out from underneath all that debt. And his attitude is he doesn't really care where property values go from here. If property values go back down, he's comfortable with the payment and he's not going anywhere. He's staying in the house. He'll just ride it out. So brilliant question. I'm happy to discuss that in detail with anybody who wants to look at a debt consolidation strategy or an equity extraction strategy to buy investment property. And it doesn't have to be a refinance. If you're in love with that interest rate and you've got enough equity that the bank will do a home equity line of credit, that may work as well. Although those equity lines are not as enticing as they were even as recently as a year ago, the rates on the equity lines have moved considerably. Thanks, Chairman Powell. All right, Jen, throw me another question.
Sheila sent us this text. Are you able to include my alimony as income when I qualify for a mortgage?
Hey, Sheila, that is a great question. And the short answer is yes, assuming that you've received it for the last 2 years and the divorce decree, or some people call it the marital settlement agreement, the MSA, specifies that your ex-husband is required to pay for at least 3 more years. So when we're using sources of income, we're looking back to and forward 3 to make sure we can use those sources of income. So brilliant, brilliant question. And guys, that goes for anything. That goes for alimony. That goes for disability. If you received a judgment and you are getting paid out over time, any annuities, anything that you receive that's not directly related to work, if we can show that it's been in place for 2 years, and in the case of a divorce decree or marital settlement agreement, it's easy because it's documented that it's going to remain in place for at least 3. Hey, while I'm thinking about it, child support's another place where a lot of people get confused about this, because oftentimes the child support will cut off at age 18. So if your child is 16, then you fail that 3-year forward test. So that's where knowing that 2 years back, 3 years forward makes a big, big difference. So, and we've had some interesting conversations with alimony recipients who fall madly in love and cohabitate because they never want to let their ex-husband off the hook for that alimony. And some marital settlement agreements are written that if you remarry, the alimony stops. So, great question. We get that a lot. Any type of additional or ancillary income is going to fall under that answer. So I appreciate that. That's a good one. I hope that helps. If you need more information, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to walk you through it. Anybody who has additional questions, just reach out to us. We're here and we are happy to help. That anytime hotline rings to my office when we're not here in the studio. But hey guys, you hear the music? You know what that means? That's my cue. We'll be back in a few. Sit tight on the other side of this very short break. We'll be back with more of the Mr. Mortgage Show. So you think interest rates have gotten too high to refi? Well, not so fast. There are several reasons people refinance. Sure, lowering your interest rate is one, but there's debt consolidation, home improvement, unexpected medical expenses, pulling out some equity to go buy an investment property. Heck, I even know of one guy who refinanced his house so he could buy his mistress a condo. But let's jump back to debt consolidation for a minute. I'm working with a client right now. His name is Ben. He's going to refinance his house, pay off a host of credit cards and 2 truck payments. And yes, his mortgage interest rate is going to go up, but his monthly expenses are going to go down significantly. And that monthly savings is going to get he and his family back on track. Guys, if you've got questions, check us out at mrmortgageradio.com. That's mrmortgageradio.com. My name is Mark Eitel, NMLS 1929005. I host the Mr. Mortgage Show, and we are always here and happy to help. Check us out at mrmortgageradio.com.
Welcome back to the Mr. Mortgage Show. Call us now at 855-462-7292.
All right, we are back. My name is Mark Eitel, and you are tuned into the Mr. Mortgage Show. Guys, you're in the right place if you are super, super confused and frustrated and just want to know what the heck's going on. Where are housing prices going? Does it still make sense to buy? Does it make sense to sell? What is going on, right? We're all super confused, but we're going to get through it together. Guys, we do this each week right here on WPSL. Super excited to be with you. If you've got questions or comments, call or text 855-462-7292. That's 855-462-7292. That is the Anytime Hotline. Jen is in the studio with me, womanning that hotline, and she'll get your questions on the air. Hey, if you prefer to shoot us an email, just visit mrmortgageradio.com. That's mrmortgageradio.com. Scroll to the bottom of the page, click that email icon, and you can shoot her your questions. That way, she'll read them on the air for you. Hey, but speaking of Jen and speaking of your questions, let's keep this train rolling. Hey, Jen, do you have another question?
Penny is asking, I saw a headline about 40-year mortgages, but I can't find any details. Are there really 40-year loans?
Hey, Penny, that's a great question. Lots of confusion around the 40-year loan. A month or so ago, maybe 2 months now, everybody was running around the internet saying that FHA just announced a 40-year loan. Kind of, right? What they did was they announced a 40-year amortization in some of their COVID workouts, right? So if you were in a payment deferral situation, they may extend the AM schedule out to 40 years to make the payments palatable. Now, there are 40-year loans for investment properties. So the landlord loan, if you're buying an investment property, has a 40-year option. And it's quite cool because the first 10 years, it's a fixed rate for the whole 40-year period. And for the first 10 years, it can be interest only, which a lot of investors like because they're less concerned with appreciation and more concerned with cash flow, right? Because we talk about it all the time. Equity's cool, but equity doesn't buy the groceries and put gas in the car. Cash flow does. So by extending that term to 40 years and using the 10-year interest-only feature, a lot of investors are capitalizing by increasing the cash flow in the first 10 years. So it makes sense in the right situations. It's very, very different than the risky loans of the early 2000s. But yeah, they do exist in the investor world. Where a lot of people got confused was in the purchase of a primary residence. We're not there yet. It's likely that FHA will roll it out in the future. We're just not there yet. Hey, Jen, can you toss me another question?
Theo sent us this. As a seller, do you think it's better for us to hold a mortgage for the buyer or offer a lease with option to buy? Thanks for your help.
Hey, Theo, this is more and more of a conversation lately because people have so much equity and because interest rates are a bit higher. As a seller, if you don't need that equity extraction, you're using the current environment to create cash flow. We just talked about it a second ago. There's pros and cons to each circumstance. I like lease with an option to buy if I'm selling because I still own the property. And if the tenant, or in this case the buyer, fails to exercise the option or fails to perform, I don't have to go through a foreclosure process. I go through an eviction process. I still own the property. So there are pros and cons to each of those strategies. They both make sense if the circumstances are right. In this environment, they both make sense. But it would a lot of information I would need regarding your specific circumstance, and we could talk through it. But from a risk standpoint, the lease with option to buy probably protects you a little bit more. From the buyer's perspective, they would most prefer the seller-held mortgage because then they actually own the property, and it would be easier for them to refinance you out of the deal at a later date. It's not a purchase transaction, it's a refi. So, but brilliant question. I'm happy to dive deep with anybody on that, but great one. Hey, Jen, do you have another question?
Maury sent an email. If we do a reverse mortgage, what happens to our home when we die? Can we still leave the house to our son?
Hey, Maury, that's a great question, my man. And a lot of people have this question. There are tons of misconceptions around a reverse mortgage. You still own your home. It's not the bank's house. You can absolutely leave it to your son. The bank has a lien on your property, just like any other mortgage. The reverse mortgage is a lien on your property, but it does not prohibit you from selling the property. It doesn't prohibit you from refinancing the property, and it certainly doesn't prohibit you from leaving it to your children. And if all of these statistical data points that we've talked about over the last year or two in this most recent article that I just shared are all wrong, and you take a reverse mortgage today and then the housing market crashes, an ugly crash, right? Which, property values plummet by half. Now you owe more than the property's worth. Well, the bank can't take any of that money back from you. And when you die, if your children inherit the property and you're upside down, there's no recourse on your estate. The loan is insured against loss to the lender. So you just slide the keys across the table to the lender, and they deal with selling it at a loss and recouping the proceeds from the insurance policy that is built into the loan product. It's an FHA loan product, and it's insured just like an FHA loan. So a lot of people don't realize that. You could have a ton of other assets in your estate, and they're not going to come after those assets to satisfy a negative equity position. So it's a brilliant product for the right person. And guys, if you've heard me say it once, you've heard me say it 100 times, and I apologize, but I'm prepping you because I'm going to say it again. A reverse mortgage isn't good and it's not bad. It's a tool. It's just a tool. And in the right hands, it can do amazing things and change your life and give you some breathing room and no more monthly mortgage payment. And it's the tool that I always reference as a hammer. You can build a house with a hammer, but you can tear a house down with a hammer too. So just think of it as a tool. And if it's the right tool for the job, it can do wonders for you. But brilliant question. Thanks for that one. Hey, Jen, do you have another question ready over there?
Marcus sent us this text. I'm getting ready to buy a home later this year. How much should I save for closing costs? I have my down payment, but I know there will be more costs. It will be my first time.
Hey, Marcus, that's a great question, my man. It's tough because there's not like an end-all be-all rule of thumb because your closing costs and prorations and things like that fluctuate from property to property based on taxes, based on insurance, and time of the month as well as time of the year that you close. You'll get prorations back from the seller in some instances. So, but to answer your question, I would plan to play it safe somewhere between 3 to 5%. So if you were buying a $300,000 house and you were putting 5% down, I would have another $15,000 just in case you needed it, because you've got to pay for things like your appraisal, your survey. There are expenses in addition to the quote unquote typical closing costs. So, but if you want to break down the specifics, I'd be happy to do it for you. But I would plan on somewhere around a 3 to 5% cushion. But again, it's specific to the property that you're buying. The cost of the insurance is a huge variable right now. And you'll pay for the first year's insurance policy up front, and then you'll pay a few months of it that go into escrow. So when the 12-month anniversary of you owning that property comes around, there's enough money in your escrow account to renew the policy in full. So your policy premium for insurance gets paid once a year. So excited about that also. But hey guys, you hear the music? You know what that means? That's my cue. We'll be back in a few. Sit tight on the other side of this short break. We'll be back with more of the Mr. Mortgage Show. Raise your hand if you are freaked out by what's happening in the banking world. Well, no, put your hands back on the steering wheel. It's all starting to feel like a house of cards. And what about that $17 billion, yes, billion with a B, dollars worth of bondholder money that was lost in that Credit Suisse takeover? Right now, I'm hearing more and more people talk about a flight to safety, and they're looking at gold and silver and other precious metals, but also rental property. Yep, income-producing rental property is starting to become sexy again. Guys, we've got an amazing loan program called the Landlord Loan. It's an easy way to acquire rental property. If you've got good credit and the assets, we don't even look at your personal income. We look at the income produced by the property. Assuming that it supports the debt, boom, you're a landlord. Check us out at MrMortgageRadio.com. That's MrMortgageRadio.com. My name is Mark Eitel, NMLS 1929005, and my team and I are here and happy to help. Check us out at MrMortgageRadio.com.
Welcome back to the Mr. Mortgage Show. Call us now at 855-462-7292.
All right, we are back. My name is Mark Eitel, and you are listening to the Mr. Mortgage Show. And guys, thanks so much for hanging out with us today. We've had some great questions so far, some great comments. Some we couldn't even read on the air. They were so saucy. But hey, if you've got questions or comments, just call or text 855-462-7292. That's 855-462-7292. That is the Anytime hotline, 855-462-7292. Hey, and we call it the Anytime hotline because when we're not in the studio making mortgage radio magic, that pushes to my office. So you can get us anytime on that number, or just check out MrMortgageRadio.com. That's MrMortgageRadio.com. Scroll to the bottom of the page, click that email icon, and send your questions over that way. Jen will read them on the air for you. Hey, but speaking of your questions and speaking of Jen, let's try to get through a few more. Hey, Jen, are you ready?
Chantal is asking, how important is the appraisal? I mean, why should the bank care if someone is willing to pay more for my house?
That's an interesting, well, it's not, it's a good question. It's a good question, Chantal. The bank cares what the value of the property is because they're loaning a percentage of the value of that asset. So if someone's willing to spend more than it's worth, that's on them. The bank's going to adjust the loan amount down to a percentage of the value or the purchase price, whichever's less. So the same applies if a home appraises for more than a property's worth. It doesn't immediately mean somebody can borrow 100% of the purchase price. The bank always loans a percentage of the value of the property or the purchase price, whichever is less. That's why they're concerned. It's their money, they're loaning, and they want to make sure there's enough equity in the asset based on the guidelines and loan programs that the person's applying for. But I hear your frustration. If you need help and you are in the middle of a transaction and a buyer is struggling, give us a shout. Maybe we can help you work that out, and they might be able to buy the property anyway. So hope that helps, Chantel. Thank you so much for your question. Hey, Jen, you have another one ready?
Ryan sent this email. What's the difference between a rate buy-down and adjustable rate mortgage? They really seem like the same thing.
Hey, Ryan, I get it. They do act a lot alike in the first 3 years. So the rate buy down that a lot of people love talking about is the 3-2-1 interest rate buy down. And let's use round numbers and say today's rate was 7, although we're back under 7. With the 3-2-1 buy down, your interest rate would be 4% for the first year. So that actual rate of the day minus 3. So you would go from 4% to 5 to 6 to 7, and then you would stay there for the remainder of the loan term. With an adjustable rate mortgage, it starts at a lower rate. It's usually 3 years, 5 years, or 7 years that it's fixed for that period of time, and then it adjusts every year thereafter, sometimes every 6 months, but most commonly every year, based on an index and a margin. So they do both start with a lower payment, but the adjustable rate mortgage adjusts for the life of the loan, and the interest rate buy down adjusts back up for the first 3 years and then ends up where it should have been from the beginning and stays there for the remainder of the loan term. So hope that helps. Hey, Jen, do you have another one ready?
Michelle sent us this one. What is the minimum credit score required for a mortgage?
Hey, Michelle, that's a great question. There are loan programs that go down to 550. Anything over 600 has a fighting chance, but there are some loan programs with manual underwrites for credit scores as low as 550. Now, I caution you this. Oftentimes with the lower credit score, it's not the credit score in and of itself that's a challenge. Oftentimes, it's whatever's pulling that score down. So if you have a recent bankruptcy, or you've got a lot of late payments, or a car repossession, all of that recent activity might prevent you from qualifying for the loan program because of the number of lates or the recency of the lates. So oftentimes it's not the score itself, but what is affecting the score. So I hope that helps. If you want us to look at it, I'm happy to. And at very least, we can give you a credit plan so that you can work through the challenges and be mortgage ready as quickly as possible. Happy to help with that. So appreciate that question. Hey, Jen, throw me another one.
Wendy is asking, we hear you talking about the landlord loan. I know you said if the property cash flows, we don't have to verify our income. Am I understanding this correctly? Can you explain a little more? Thanks.
Hey, Wendy, that is absolutely correct. So the landlord loan looks at the cash flow from the property, and assuming that the income that the property produces will cover the expenses of owning that property, meaning the principal, the interest, the taxes, the insurance, and if there are association dues on the property, as long as the incoming rent payment from the tenant will cover those outgoing expenses at least a 1-to-1 ratio, then you don't have a problem. Now, you do have to meet credit score requirements and asset requirements, but we don't have to look at your personal income. The weight of the decision based on income is solely on the property. So brilliant question. I appreciate that. Hope that helps. And guys, if anybody needs help with a rental property purchase mortgage or cash out refi, a lot of people use the landlord loan to pull cash out and go buy another rental property, which is really cool when you start talking about multiplying the leverage and letting someone else pay down the debt while you build equity wealth. That's a lot of fun if you want to have that conversation. Hey, Jen, do you have another question?
Amy sent us this. If you sell a commercial building, can we 1031 exchange the profits and roll them into multiple residential properties? They will all be rentals.
Hey, Amy, that's a great question. Wow, I don't get this one often. So there are two rules of the 1031 exchange that are going to come into play here. One is called the 3 property rule, which is just as it sounds. You can buy 3 properties from one 1031 exchange. So sell your apartment building and go buy 3 duplexes, buy 3 fourplexes, whatever it is. You can do a 1 to 3 exchange. But there are instances where you can exceed that 3 property rule. But here's the caveat, and this is where it's a little bit challenging in this market. The combined value of the properties that you're buying, the new properties that you have to identify within the first 45 days, can't exceed 200% of the value of the first property. So if you're selling a big apartment building and you're going out and buying a bunch of single family rentals, then you could most likely exceed that 3 property rule. But brilliant question. 1031 exchange is an amazing tool for people who want to forego the gains and they want to capitalize on a big equity extraction position and then go buy additional income producing properties. So 1031 exchange is a very, very neat tax. I don't want to say loophole because it's really not a loophole. It's a brilliant tool within the tax code that allows you to do that. Now, here's the thing, guys. Anybody out there that's thinking of doing a 1031 exchange, it has to be facilitated by an approved entity. So an attorney or a title company oftentimes can be approved for facilitating a 1031 exchange, because when you sell that property, you've got to leave the proceeds in escrow until you go buy the new property. So if you've closed on a property that you sold and you're thinking, oh man, I should have 1031 exchanged it, I need to now, it may be too late. I don't know of an instance where you can work backwards from that. So, but brilliant question. I appreciate that one. Hey guys, you hear the music? You know what that means? We are wrapping up another week right here at the Mr. Mortgage Show. Man, oh man, where does the time go? I love spending some time with you guys. You brought some great questions this week. Hey, if you need us during the week, if you or a friend or a family or a coworker has mortgage questions, real estate questions, need some help, need a great agent, need a great mortgage guy, check out MrMortgageRadio.com, MrMortgageRadio.com. Guys, remember, if you can hear my voice, we could be your choice. But we are out of here. Guys, have an amazing week. We'll be back next week right here. Same bat time, same bat station. Until then, be good.
That's a wrap. Join Mark Eitel next week for more thrilling, edge-of-your-seat discussions about real estate and mortgages right here on The Mr. Mortgage Show.
Hey, it's Mark Eitel, host of the Mr. Mortgage Show, and I'm going to interrupt this commercial break to ask you for a favor. If you know any friends, family, coworkers, or the guy in front of you at the grocery line who's talking or thinking about buying or selling or refinancing real estate, I'm hoping I can count on you to help me spread the word, introduce them to me, to the team. You can do that by simply sharing MrMortgageRadio.com. That's MrMortgageRadio.com. Guys, it's Mark Eitel, NMLS 1929005. Now, back to the commercials.